screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones, the holly suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and block the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful. Friends, welcome back to Rogue Soul, where tonight we're talking about the Artemis mission past the moon. Should have perhaps launched already. They have had some delays. They're going to launch soon. We've got 4 astronauts that are going to be on there. If you're a space is fake and gay or a flat earth kind of person, I'm sure you'll hate this episode and all the episodes I do in which we talk about the cyclical disasters that seem to visit Earth and their correspondence to the sun and its cycles. And so we will be talking about that as well, because that seems to have something to do with the Artemis mission. And so we'll get into all of it. And maybe space is fake and gay, and maybe the Earth is flat. But those are actually the 2 conspiracy theories I've come across with the least amount of actual discernible evidence. I know some people really hate that. I went deep into it. I looked at every single argument, mathematical and everything with flat earth, and in the end there was quite enough evidence for me to say probably not. Actually, a lot of those seem like really good arguments, but actually probably not flat. For a minute I was almost convinced. I was like, it does seem flat. They're really good questions that can't be answered or seem like they're not answered. And then I found answers to some of them. So those went away, right? And that's what we do. That's how we roll. We investigate. When we find new information, we say, yeah, perhaps, maybe, or, ooh, yep, that's almost solid, almost for sure. And then, ooh, here's more evidence. It's actually something else. And that's how any scientific, logical, investigative mind would go. So you could pride yourself, in my opinion, if you have an open mind, which means that you can investigate things and come away with a different answer than the one you expected. All right, so let's get into the content tonight. We've got Rogue Soul services for you. Of course, this is the hub. This is where everything that I do is. You can receive healing, get one-on-one sessions with me, book from anywhere in the world for those. You can also get channeled messages from me. You can get to the books that I write. They're all here on the site. There's a fictional trilogy, Sine Curve of Aeons, that goes through the cyclical destruction of humanity. Oh, wow. Well, think about that. And also the channeled source messages from the spiritual ancestors through me to you, uplifting and beautiful messages like the key of transformational healing and all endings are beginnings. Those are available for you on the site as well at roguesoul.org. We're going to have a retreat this summer. If you feel called, you can apply to come. Some of these rooms are already gone. I expect most of them, if not all of them, to be gone quite soon. So if it's a strong urge, you might want to jump on it. You can also go to the shop where I've got orgone, lotus votives, as well as pillars, the strongest orgone I've ever encountered, probably the strongest you've ever encountered too. Beautiful pieces as well, uplifting any space, any spiritual intention that you have. You can also donate to this cause here in the shop. So donation of support in multiples of 10. You can go as high as you want. You can give 1,000, you can give 10. And so that's there in the shop as well, the donation of support. I appreciate everybody who donates to keep this project going. Rogue Soul has always been free. Some content has been behind a paywall, and none of it is now. It's all of it's for free. And so if you find, you used to tip or you used to support in some other way, that's a great way to do it. And so go to the shop, get yourself any of those things. You'll notice there's no classes right now because we're already halfway through the most recent dream walking class. We're going to actually do a remote viewing extension of that class. So that's going to be really fun. Practice and learn how to remote view. And then it'll be back to another class cycle. I'm not sure which yet. I don't know which I'm called to do yet. So we'll see what comes up. And that, of course, will be here in the shop as well for you on Rogue Soul. So keep in touch so you always know what's going on. You can sign up for the email list at the site. And there's also my Substack. It's another way to keep in touch. It's separate from the email list, although you also sign up for it if you want to. There's free subscriptions, and so you get a notification or an email, or you get access anytime I publish something. Most recently, I published this digestive fire tonic that I take. It reduces inflammation, increases clarity, improves mood, increases absorption of various minerals and vitamins and substances that are good for you, stimulates digestion. Super simple, super easy to make. So I just share about that, how good it can be for anyone, even if you don't have any dysfunction, even if you don't think you have inflammation. And so yeah, really cool. Things like that are always here on rogueways.substack.com, but also notifications about events like this most recent big abundance event, tiny price. This is one of the lowest prices I've ever offered for meditation and blessing. These usually last half hour, 45 minutes or so. I schedule them usually for an hour. We come together, it's on Zoom. We usually go very deep in. People who say they can't meditate are always consistently like, wow, I've never gone that deep before. And then when the blessing comes through, if you've never received it, you don't know. If you have, you know, and that's what keeps people coming back, because that is such a powerful dose of heaven, dose of source, dose of goodness that you get to get. So I hope that you join us this time. It is this Thursday, a couple days away, and we're getting the abundance, So abundance, of course, can mean so many things. It can be monetary, of course. It can be in the form of, space, or, housing, homing. It can be in the form of, our vehicles, our investments, properties, different things like that, all sorts of stuff, right? So abundance is all over the place. And so it just depends. Each person usually comes with their intention of what it is they would like more abundance around, right? And that's what they then get. I love the stories afterwards. I often am getting emails from people that are like, oh my God, like I literally got done with the meditation, got a text about, someone, and they wanted to give me all this money, or I got this, sudden influx from a place I just couldn't have even imagined, and those stories are awesome. I love them. So those types of things happen when we go deep. So I hope to see you guys all there. Big abundance event, tiny prices on the Substack. You can then click over to the event, like all of my services, my tarot readings, past life readings, and more. It's schedulable on the Calendly. So you could get there from the site, roguesoul.org. You can get there by going straight to the Calendly, calendly.com/rogueways, or you can be on the Substack. And if you're subscribed, you already know. You already got that notification and you already signed up. So those are all the ways you can join us this Thursday for the event. And let's get into it then. This was shared, I think, by Open Minded Approach, really cool Twitter account to follow, especially if you're interested in the cyclical destruction and the solar cycles, cyclical destruction of Earth and civilizations on Earth, as well as their connection to the solar cycles. Also, I don't think it came from Suspicious Observer or Space Weather News, I think is what he goes by now. Space Weather News, I think, is more likely tweeting his own stuff and whatnot. But Open Minded Observer often tweets and shares these documents, documentaries, famous people saying certain things, and just really interesting connections to the cyclical destruction events. And so very cool. If you want to follow either of them, they're both fantastic, obviously far beyond me. They're experts in their field. I'm just a fun, I like to investigate, right? I like to know and then share it with you. So this was an abrupt climate change scenario and its implications for the United States national security. This is from 2003. This is a government document. This was released, it was allowed to be declassified. Essentially, there's no redactions or anything. You can just come and see it. And so this is from the Department of Technical Information Center. That's where a lot of our documents apparently are that we can go access, that the government has created, studies and various things. And so this is from there. I just opened the PDF, which you can see the link right here. And this is the document itself. An abrupt climate change scenario and its implications for United States national security, October 2003. And they say the purpose of this report is to imagine the unthinkable, to push the boundaries of current research on climate change so we may better understand the potential implications on United States national security. We have interviewed leading climate change scientists, conducted additional research, and reviewed several iterations of the scenario with these experts. Scientists support the project, but caution that the scenario depicted is extreme in two fundamental ways. First, they suggest the occurrences we outline would most likely happen in a few regions rather than globally. Second, they say the magnitude of the event may be considerably smaller. We have created a climate change scenario that, although not the most likely, is plausible and would challenge United States national security in ways that should be considered immediately. So, they do a lot of these things where they're imagining, and unlike what a lot of conspiracy theory talk and alternative news talk says, it's not always that there's a simulation or a sort of, imagined future scenario and this sort of war games or various games around it, and they then go live. Although that happens a lot, and that's really interesting. Event 201 is one of them. We've had tons of those. 9/11 actually is an example. The Boston bombing is an example. And so plenty of those, but it's not always true. There are plenty that don't ever go live as well. So this is perhaps one of those, right? And also interesting that they stress that if there were this massive sudden climate change, that it would probably be localized to a few regions of the earth and maybe won't even happen at all. And so they stress that. And that's interesting in itself because a lot of evidence actually definitely points the other direction. You have flash frozen mammoths with green grass still in their mouths and bellies. That's a pretty massive destruction event. I mean, there is no way to flash freeze a mammal with any of the temperatures we currently record and have ever recorded on Earth. So for it to get that cold that quickly is pretty, intense. So to pretend like it couldn't be global or couldn't be large is, I think they're just sort of maybe doing that to sort of hedge like the report, or maybe they knew they were going to release this and they didn't want people to freak out. Maybe this is the sort of safe to release version of what they actually have been studying. So there's not a lot in here that I think is otherwise that interesting, except one key piece. So most of this, they're talking about climate change, just like you hear the climate alarmists talking about it, that, there's a human induced climate change, that what we're doing to the environment, we're melting the global ice caps and they're desalinating the oceans and the carbon capture is lowered and we're spewing carbon in the atmosphere and it's warming the planet, and that could actually lead to like a sudden cooling event, or the falling apart of the jet streams or the ocean circulation currents, and that these would cause big climate shifts. And that's what they kind of focus on in this document for the most part. So that's the standard environmentalist, green movement, climate change alarmist view, right? And this kind of outlines it. It says, it might get cold and dry and have storms in a lot of areas. There might be less access to food and water, and energy might be hard to come by in some of these scenarios. And so border management and global conflict might escalate and have really deleterious effects on our economy. And that's what they're generally looking at in this report. Those things are all true. If any of that happened, that'd be true, right? That's what humans would tend to do. So that's how it would go down. And they also, interestingly, include this kind of out of the blue and very in the face of that exact climate scenario I just shared, which is, again, the standard climate alarmist model. They share this graph of the temperature, it's specifically over Greenland, which is really interesting. Greenland is specifically mentioned in this report, and that's part of why it's come up recently in some circles that look into these things, because of course Trump's been talking about acquiring Greenland, and that seems really important to him, and people have all kinds of theories why, and there's multiple reasons actually. It's rich in natural resources that we probably want, that no one's really developing or using. It is also, key to keeping maybe Russia and China out of our sort of zone and sphere. It's also key if there's a dramatic climate shift. It's key. It has some key arcs like seed vaults and things that are stored there. It also is a place that is projected to potentially be in a tropical latitude once a very specific global cataclysm may take place, which would be a polar reversal. And so Greenland is highlighted here to anyone who's paying attention to all of those parameters of life on Earth. Greenland is like the place to have under your thumb, right? It's not about power and conquest necessarily. It's about all the things I just said, which definitely are connected. So temperature over Greenland is specifically indicated in this graph, which you can see here. And then age of thousands of years before the present is also there. So they go back to 5,000 years, 10,000 years, 15,000 years, and then maybe 17,000 years is where it cuts off. And what's interesting is you look at what we're calling, global warming, often global climate change. You look at the temperature here, and for the past 10,000 years, it's been almost exactly the same. If you then go back further, you see how low it dips, negative 60 degrees in the Younger Dryas, which is an ice age that we went through. Mind you, humans lived through that ice age. In fact, we have plenty of evidence that there's pre-cataclysmic civilizations that were buried under the ice. All kinds of evidence. This show is not about that, so I won't even begin to outline it, but it is an overwhelming amount of evidence that leaves me beyond a shadow of a doubt that we've had previous civilizations. I get to the point where I'm very confused that there's anyone left on Earth that doesn't know that. It's just like, it is so obvious. So besides that, that evidence, this negative 60, humans survived Earth being covered in miles of ice at negative 60 degrees about 12,000 years ago. And so this graph shows that, right? It shows that. It shows this dramatic warming right before the Younger Dryas ice age. So we had this very cold ice age. We had some warming, things got better, and then it went back into the ice age again. And then it came out slowly, slowly, slowly. By 10,000 years ago, we're at about the temperature range that we see now on Earth. Still big dips compared to what we feel comfortable with. But for that entire 10,000 year region in the past, it's been pretty normal, pretty average, right? Maybe getting down to like, negative 20 at one point. This is cold. It's not great. Nobody wants that, but it's a lot easier than negative 60 and miles of ice. So anyway, it outlines these. It points those out. The Younger Dryas, that 8,200 year event that I think they've only recently given a name to, where it dipped down to about negative 20, 25 or so. We've got a little ice age, so-called, just within the past 1,000 years, where the whole world was pretty cold and farming was hard and life was rough. It's written about. I mean, we have written record of, we know it, right? And that was not connected to any human activity. It wasn't connected to coal burning or anything else. There weren't even all that many humans on Earth, given, what we know about population. It was a lot less than now, no matter what the population actually is, which might be very different than we're told, but a lot less people, a lot less action, definitely not caused by us, still a dip, still a cooling. So it points that out, this little ice age, the medieval wars around that, this 8,200 year event, and then this huge dip in temperature, which was the last ice age, the Younger Dryas. This is in this document, even though this same document talks about man-made climate and all of these things. It does start to then become obvious that there are aware of and willing to admit a non-man-made climate shift that is often dramatic. So aside from, it starts to talk about these cooling events, the Younger Dryas, the little ice age, and more, and it goes into obviously those weren't man-made climate change events, right? And so it says in the future, this is perhaps going to happen again. This is one of the things I always, if I'm talking to someone who can listen, as you guys have heard probably many times, that I try to bring up, look, you can be stressed about the climate. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. But if you want to have some perspective that might make you feel better, we've lived through ice ages and we didn't cause those. So it's probably going to be okay. Whatever you think is the worst possible scenario can't possibly be as bad as flash frozen mammoths in an ice age, right? It can't possibly be as bad as that. Or it's as bad. And then it's like, well, why even care about what humans are doing then? Because that can happen on its own. So it talks about warming. We've been warming and now we're in this very warm time. Yes, of course. It talks about the potential for the weather. And this was in 2003. So it talks about the 2010s through 2020s are going to be full of droughts, full of annual temperatures dropping up to 5 degrees. And this is the opposite of what we were told, like global warming. This is a warm us. We're so hot. Every summer's so hot. This report's saying, oh, they're going to drop. Temperatures are going to drop. But then it says also temperatures could increase up to 4 degrees. So we got a 5 degrees cooler and 4 degrees warmer. And just depending where you are in the globe, that's true. It can happen that way. It makes sense. It's not crazy to say that. The messaging just isn't always in line with what the scientists and the government seem to actually know, is it? Winter storms intensify, summer storms intensify, monsoons intensify, etc. It's not connecting that to the sun, by the way. It's not explicitly doing any of that. It's just saying this is likely to happen and here's what will happen because of it, or here's how we can plan for that. Gives you an outline of the different areas of the world. Africa is going to be dry. North America is going to be cold, dry, and windy. This is 2010 to 2020, it says. Do you remember feeling that way? I don't. I'm sure it was kind of anything. There was probably hot years, cold years, dry years, wet years, cold, dry, and windy in Europe, wet and stormy in Asia, dry and intermittent monsoons over in the South Pacific area. Yeah, sure, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't seem to really necessarily have mattered too much. Definitely, we haven't seen these massive food shortages they're talking about. This massive freshwater shortage they're talking about. None of those things have come to happen. But it does then show this graphic. It says the graphic shows how abrupt climate change may cause human carrying capacity to fall below usage of the ecosystem, suggesting insufficient resources leading to contraction of the population through war, disease, and famine. So it's saying, what humans can produce and handle and maintain is going to drop, but the humans are still going to be there. Which is kind of the definition. If it's sudden, if there's a sudden cataclysm, yes, that's exactly what would happen. We would have way less resources and way more people, and so a lot of people would die. So it's not just like, do people die in a giant tidal wave, or like the continent slips and like it's underwater now, and so a bunch of people die in that, or all these potential things, volcanoes, earthquakes, storms that could kill people, but also the ongoing strife, right? If a sudden climactic event occurred, there would be ongoing fallout and massive death afterwards as well, most likely. It doesn't have to be that way, but to be fair, if you look out at the general populace, that is what you would expect. There's not a ton of people who are really capable of even taking care of themselves with the gigantic amount of support that our modern society offers them, right? So let alone if they lose all that support, what would happen? And yeah, people tend to get violent when they're stressed and when they're stressed for resources. So war would be predictable, all those things. So I don't, why they have to make a graphic for that. I don't know, but they do. They have a chart here. You can see it. A chart based on their guess. So it goes into their timeline, 2020 to 2030. They also have outlined here, and then it stops. It doesn't go beyond 2030. Why? I don't know. Maybe that was just what they were told. Just do the next, 30 years and leave it at that. But the whole time they're predicting the war, the famine, the massive death, the droughts, all this stuff. They say, could this really happen? Ocean, land, and atmosphere scientists of some of the world's most prestigious organizations have uncovered new evidence of the past decade, suggesting that the plausibility of severe and rapid climate change is higher than most of the scientific community and perhaps all of the political community is prepared for. What's ironic is they're saying this in 2003. That's 23 years ago as of this show. But I'm not saying, oh, why doesn't everyone know this then? I'm saying, why did it take them until 2003 to admit that? Because they've been suppressing the science of cyclical cataclysm and cyclical destruction forever. You can find evidence of it all through the 20th century at colleges and scientific establishments and like that. They're basically outlawing it. They're not funding it. They're laughing at the people. They're smearing the people who are looking into it. right? This is the general attack that you create against anyone who's saying whatever it is you don't want to hear. That's how they roll. So they knew it way before then. Why did they decide to leave it and put it in this document now? I don't know. I think sometimes the government's so, bureaucratic and fragmented that they're not all on the same page about what they're supposed to be saying and doing. So, maybe it just slipped out. But either way, it's here. And they're like, yeah, it turns out there's some evidence for the sudden cataclysmic event that might happen, but most people don't know it. They're like, yeah, your own government is saying that to you right here. Right? And then it's like, if it occurs, this phenomenon will disrupt current gradual global warming trends. Yeah, if it occurs, it'll literally interrupt every trend, not just climate trends, the clothing trends, eating trends, moving trends, like migration trends, all trends that humans have would suddenly change permanently. It says paleoclimatic evidence suggests that such an abrupt climate change could begin in the near future. They do not go into detail. They just say paleoclimatic evidence. It's essentially saying the history of climate that we can find suggests that this happens somewhat often. And in fact, we've noticed, this is the subtext, right? We've noticed a cycle around this, and therefore it could happen again soon, because that's what the cycle indicates. When that's what's hidden in this sentence, paleoclimatic evidence suggests that such an abrupt climate change could begin in the near future. So again, if they were going to go into detail, they'd share all the things that I've been sharing with you, that, Space Weather News shares, the Open Minded Approach shares, and many other people share. They would be going into all those details to share that with you. But no, they're just letting you know in this one sentence, given what we're at 2003, like this might come soon, actually. Maybe there's a reason why their outline only went to 2030. I'm just saying, if you know me, you know that I'm saying this is going to happen before 2033. So I think there's a reason why they made this report in 2003 and only went to 2030, because I think they knew something about that. Again, a lot of people who are independent, they're outside of the government, they're researching this on their own, they're looking into the data. They're saying by 2040, 2050, 2060, at the most 2080. Right, that's what a lot of the sort of more academic, researchers are saying. But this was your government in 2003 saying, maybe around 2030. And just so happens to be the date I was told as well. They look into some of these salinity measures and how the salinity is dropping, and that could just radically shift ocean currents. We kind of talked about that. Again, we're pretending it's man-made, but here they are saying, like, this is actually a cyclical thing we've noticed in paleoclimatology. And so, yeah, they talk about this abrupt climate shift, abrupt climate change. They even say, are we prepared for history to repeat itself again? They're essentially saying, like, this is going to happen. Are we ready for it? They say there's a debate in newspapers around the globe today on the impact of human activity on climate change. Because economic prosperity is correlated with energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, it's often argued that economic progress leads to climate change. Competing evidence suggests that climate change can occur regardless of human activity, as seen in climate events that happened prior to modern society. Even your government admits it. Competing evidence suggests, he says, yeah, a lot of focus is on this, like man-made and the cost of progress and an economy and, what we spew into the environment. But competing evidence suggests climate change can occur regardless of human activity, regardless, no matter what we do or don't do, no matter what we do or don't do. Stressing that because it's really the whole point. It's the whole point of everything, right? And for some reason, here's one report, right, that we're allowed to see. There's plenty that I'm sure we've never been shown, but we can also garner some information about what's been going on around us. So interestingly, a lot of quite wealthy people are pretty focused on creating ways to outlive a potential, we'll guess climatic, but globally destructive event. Why would so many very rich people be so focused on this? And I'll say not all of them are just in it for themselves. There's a ton of them, like the people who work on things like this Rosetta project, who are quite concerned about retaining information for a group of humans who might survive such an event, that were not then lost and starting from scratch again. And a lot of people, a lot of conspiracy and alternative people call this the Great Reset, and they think that it's done to them by the elite, which is, potential, sure, but no. I mean, there's no one who's actually in charge of the globe and the weather and the sun. So these are natural events. But, not a lot of them would think that there would be a group of elite people or upper echelon people or the psychopath class or whatever you want to call the richest of the rich that care actually and want humanity to survive such an event. They're so convinced an event is likely to happen and so concerned about what happens afterwards that they go to great lengths, in fact, to do things like have the seed vault and these various arcs and these places where a human genetic genome or even DNA itself is being stored. Right, and those places are no myth. They're no conjecture. Like, we know those places exist. I've been learning about them since 1980s. Like these are projects that have actually been created and kept going. Well, here's another one. This is the Rosetta project, a long now foundation library of human language. The long now. The long now is a whole foundation all about our perspective being much too short and us needing to think over at least 10,000 year time spans. Convenient, as these cyclical events tend to be connected to a 6,000 and a 12,000 year cycle, right? A 6,000 year cycle being, it's something's going to happen every 6,000 years, but once it's going to be not so horrible, not going to wipe everything out. It's just going to make it way harder for a while. And then every other 6,000 years, it is a really, really big reset in which very little to nothing survives, right? A scattering of humans with a scattering of knowledge, and they just barely make it through. That's every 12,000 years. So, this cycle repeats. Well, 10,000 years then is right around there, right? We want to make it 10,000 years. We want our knowledge to last 10,000 years or more. We want to look ahead 10,000 years from now and imagine what people might need at that moment, right? That's the long now foundation sort of goal in general. It's like increasing humanity's perspective to not just now, not just the next 10, 15 years, not just the next 100, 10, 10,000 years. All right. So they have the Rosetta disk is the physical companion of the Rosetta Digital Language Archive. So, they've been a long time now focused on archiving all languages because some of them die out and we want spoken examples, we want written examples, we want to be able to translate it into multiple languages so that we don't lose it. So people always have that in their history. They can access that, right? So this 10,000 year library goal is to put all those languages into a way that would survive for up to 10,000 years. And just like we have the Rosetta Stone, which really helped ancient archaeologists crack the codes of some various languages. I think it had like cuneiform and maybe Egyptian hieroglyphics and something else, right? And it helped us, okay, this is what each thing means. This is, they wrote the same thing in all those languages. Well, this wants to write in a similar way, decodably, so that anyone can figure it out. All these languages, thousands of human languages inside of this disk. And you can see it here. It's like a metal globe, right? And inside of it, it has all these languages, but it also has other information about like the sun and the moon and the stars and some timing things and some other stuff in there. And so the Rosetta disk, it says, is intended to be a durable archive of human languages, as well as an aesthetic object. They're like, let's make it beautiful, functional, and it has all of these things in it. I want to say they're inspired by the Antikythera mechanism, which has always been fascinating to anyone who's been paying attention to things that are much more advanced way, way longer ago than we were told to expect, right? The Antikythera mechanism blows every argument out of the water as to whether or not there was a precursor civilization that we have since lost, which many people have called Atlantis or Mu or Lemuria or more. And it's like, well, yes, of course there is. And the Antikythera mechanism is one such irrefutable piece of evidence that there was. My other favorite is the Piri-Reis map. Those two are really good ones. There's countless others. Those are just some of my favorites. Antikythera mechanism showed the stars and sun and the moon and the positions of these things over vast distances of time, the precession of the equinoxes and more. We can't even make this device today. People have tried and they have to make it much larger than the one that we have an example of, because that's how they can make it work. Maybe now we can. Last time I really paid attention was the early 2000s. So maybe, in the last 20 years, we've made some progress. But, things like that, I think, inspire projects like this Rosetta project of getting all of these languages and all this information into a pretty small, compact, and durable space or object. It's got a central image of the Earth, a message written in 8 major world languages. And it says languages of the world. This is an archive of over 1,500 human languages assembled in the year 2008. Magnify 1,000 times to find over 13,000 pages of language documentation. So if you magnify it 1,000 times, you get this. It's a pretty advanced, very cool thing. Maybe we can't make the Antikythera mechanism, but we can make this. Pretty cool. So they could read all of these in all of these languages. Again, you'd only do this if you had the idea that there would be a need for it, potentially. Wealthy people don't tend to pour all their money into totally baseless things, right? They tend to have purposes behind it. So interesting what they might be doing. There's no platform or format dependency in order to decode it. You can read it simply with optical magnification. 13,000 pages in the collection contain documentation on all the 1,500 languages gathered from archives around the world. The Rosetta disk is held in a 4-inch spherical container. So 4 inches, it's a little bit bigger than I thought would fill your hand, right, with this globe. Split into 2 hemispheres with the 3-inch Rosetta disk sitting in an indent in the flat meeting surface of the 2 hemispheres. The upper hemisphere is made of optical glass and doubles as a 6 times viewer, so you can actually see it, some of it at least, just with the viewer that's already built in, giving visual access deeper into the tapered text rings. The bottom hemisphere is high-grade stainless steel. We've machined a hollow cylinder in the bottom. They want people to be able to write their names if they find it and add to it, basically, in the future, which is interesting, too. It says, at the very least, the Rosetta disk provides an informative overview of human linguistic diversity in the 21st century. However, it may do much more. The translations on the disk, for example, are a close analog to the Rosetta Stone, whose parallel texts, in this case unintentionally, enabled the decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphics. It isn't a great stretch to imagine that the language information on this disk could provide the key to the rediscovery of valuable society-sustaining knowledge far in the future. So they're definitely literally talking about society sustaining in the future, which would imply that we had lost that information, right? In a cataclysm, for example, the Rosetta disk, it says, is being designed and developed through the collaboration of all these artists and designers and this Long Now Foundation, like we said. It's interesting to think, too, if they make a ton of these, if they kind of scatter them about, if it will in the future become one of those mysteries like we have found of our own past, like those hexagonal, I can't even remember what they're called, but I think, a whole show on them, or at least they were highlighted in one of the many shows I've done. And it's like a hexagon, or it's a dodecahedron, I think. And some of them have holes through it and some of them don't. And they're scattered all around Europe. And I just wonder if some of those are like this, or the Dropa discs. Those are fascinating. I don't know if anyone's ever decoded those because China's got them on lockdown, but there's all these discs. They were said to have come from some people think aliens, some people think a lost people that were remnants from a prior civilization, and this was their information about their society, their civilization, or maybe if they were aliens, where they came from. But locked down by China, you can't get access to them, right? Or even those stones that are all around the Caribbean and this area. They're from tiny little balls to giant, massive spheres, and they're all perfectly spherical. And they're made of exceptionally hard stone to carve. And it's hard to make a sphere that's perfect, even out of soft stone, but much harder out of hard stone. And all of those things I just mentioned are ancient in nature. Some of them go back to prior to 10,000 years ago, so prior to the last cataclysm. And so will these be the same? Will people find them but be, flummoxed by them? I don't know. I don't know what this is, but somebody left them everywhere. And it implies that there was a precursor civilization that got wiped out, right? And will they be as flabbergasted by that as we seem to be by some of our ancient history that is alternative history, suppressed history, right? Pretty fascinating. So this Long Now Foundation, they have this intro, here it says, this present moment used to be the unimaginable future. This moment used to be the future. And interesting to think about, right? This right now is already unimaginable to some distant past. Well, someday the future is going to come and it will be unimaginable to us now. Right, so they're trying to wrap their minds around this. And these are the people who are connected to that Rosetta Sphere project with all the languages. But they also have some other things going on. And so I told you they have this idea of making the idea of now a little bit longer. Right now we have this concept that now they say is maybe about 3 days. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow is now. And if you say like nowadays, you might have meant like the last decade, this current decade, and the future decade, nowadays, modern. And then they say the long now, they want you to think about all the way back to 8,000 BCE. Oh, look, that happens to be about the time the last cataclysm ended, and we were starting to have civilization re-emerge, in my opinion. And to now, right, is about 2000, 2026, obviously, and then 12,000 years into the future or 10,000 years into the future. That's the long now, all the way since society collapsed last time, beyond when it might collapse next time. That's the long now. They're keeping an eye to that longest bit. Someone had to at some point, or we wouldn't have had things like the Antikythera mechanism or the pyramids or those stones I just described, the Dropa discs or more. We wouldn't have any of that. Someone thought it through, right? And so I even though I'm sure some of the people connected with these projects are not the best people, I appreciate their projects. I appreciate their vision. I appreciate what they're doing. And I appreciate that they seemingly are, whether intentionally or not, admitting that civilizations do collapse. That's like one of the most taboo topics in humanity is that civilizations collapse, that we are not actually at the apex of human evolution right now. In fact, we may be at the lowest point we've ever reached. We're going to hopefully go back up again. But that civilizations do collapse. They seem to have that at least as a subtext in all of their projects. So this is the Long Now Foundation. And we can also look here at one of their other projects, which is quite fascinating, which is the 10,000 year clock. So again, if they're looking for us to think forward 10,000 years, and they're perhaps creating things, objects, stuff that would help in a post-cataclysmic fallen civilization, then the 10,000 year clock makes perfect sense. Just mentioning that this exists is like a trigger for some people. They're like, no, nothing could ever change from how it is now except to get better. Like, right? And also, if anything does happen that's bad, it's humans. Couldn't possibly be some sort of, cycle that nature just goes through. Couldn't possibly be solar related to the sun, related to even bigger cosmic shifts, like passing through the galactic sheet current, which is also part of what is happening right about now. That seems to happen every 12,000 years or so. Couldn't possibly be about that, right? I think that one's actually longer than 12,000 years, forgive me. But these cycles, right, are built into nature, built into our systems. So this is the 10,000 year clock. And this is a clock it's huge. It's massive. It says the 10,000 year clock will mark time with astronomic and calendric displays and a chime generator designed with the help of Brian Eno, who's like some artist they really love, that can produce over 3.5 million unique bell chime sequences. One for every day the clock is visited for the next 10,000 years. Wow. You are a genius if you came up with that. I mean, like, kudos. It says 10,000 years is about the age of modern civilization, so the clock will measure out a future of civilization equal to its past. They're absolutely right about that. It is about how long we've been going since the last reset, as some call it, or cyclical cataclysm, as you might call it. It says this assumes our civilization is in the middle of whatever journey we are on, an implicit statement of optimism. So they are hoping that we get to see the next 10,000 years without a collapse. It's possible. Seems like our historical record does not indicate that's likely, but we'll see. It says to see the clock, you need to start at dawn. Like any pilgrimage, it will require a day's hike to reach its interior gears. The first monument scale 10,000-year clock still being assembled deep inside a mountain in West Texas. So I actually thought this was in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains, not going to lie. There might be another project they're also now creating there. And if so, it would be because Colorado seems to have great indications of being the place that might survive a cataclysm. This is why build a giant clock. Why would anyone build a clock inside a mountain with the hope that it will ring for 10,000 years? It says part of the answer is just so people will ask this question, and having asked it, prompt themselves to conjure with notions of generations and millennia. If you have a clock ticking for 10,000 years, what kinds of generational scale questions and projects will it suggest? I do love it that it inspires people to think much, much farther out from this moment. They want us to think about whether or not we're being good ancestors. So will our future generations thank us for what we have done? It says, just as Stonehenge and the pyramids help us imagine our long past, the clock invites us to imagine our long future. And it says, can you extend the horizon of your expectations for our world, for our complex of civilizations and cultures beyond the lifetime of your own children of the next 2 or 3 generations? So it's a very complex mechanism. It's huge. It goes deep into the mountain. It takes you a long time to get to it and then to get up into it. And they've created it for longevity, for maintainability, for transparency, for evolvability, for scalability. I think there's some hubris in it, not going to lie. I think, the creation of the pyramids and Stonehenge and these things actually relied on much more advanced technology than we give them credit for, a technology that we seem to have lost. And that if this clock requires any maintenance, it's already not as good as those. So the Antikythera theory mechanism didn't require any maintenance, right? I mean, technically, you keep it clean or whatever, and it sits in your pocket. Maybe you wind it or something, but this giant clock requiring maintenance means there would have to be like a cult of people that also lived in the mountain with the clock, and that's all they ever did. And they passed that down to people as they went, right? Maybe that's the plan. I don't know. So you can see kind of some schematic sort of overviews here. There's sort of a visual you can look at, then stairs that go down and hang around all the thousands and millions of chimes. The power system, it says, are solar and winders. So again, someone would have to wind it, which makes it already not going to survive 10,000 years. No offense. Just like, no, it's probably not going to happen. I don't know. But again, why would they create something like this unless they expected potential for catastrophe and that it might pass down some information to the future. Their last update is in 2024. They have some frequently asked questions. In 2022, before that, the bells pealed for the first time. So they have some footage here of that happening. You won't be able to hear it, but we'll see if it looks cool at all. They're going down into it. They have to have headlamps on because there's no lights down there. It would at least show people someone with some level of high engineering capability did this. It'd be funny, though, what stories they might make up around it, just like we do with Stonehenge and the pyramids. So that's a 10,000-year clock deep in the mountain. Let's see if any of these questions. They expect it to be fully operational within the next few years as of right now. There's people who have memberships and donate to this, which is really fascinating too. It's a massive project, and it's completely done without government. All right. Timekeeping is powered by the temperature change at the top of the mountain between day and night. Even if a big asteroid hits the Earth or volcanoes eruptions interferes with the temperature change for a few decades, the clock stores enough energy to wait it out. That is pretty cool, actually. So it doesn't require as much maintenance as I might have imagined. So it could actually work. Very, very cool. So yeah, they talk about volcanoes and asteroids, and those are the safe things to talk about. It's not quite as safe to talk about the solar catastrophe that might be the cause of all of the cyclical destruction. But Elon Musk also indicates that he knows of and perhaps expects a cyclical destructive event to visit us. It says the priority shift. Oh, sorry, let me just start here. Somebody tweets, I love how SpaceX aimed for Mars 20 years ago, and now it has to delay it by 5 to 7 years because AI satellites are more achievable in the near term. What an absolutely insane timeline we're living in. The future is going to be ridiculous. And Elon Musk replies and says, the priority shift is actually because I'm worried that a natural or man-made catastrophe stops the resupply ships coming from Earth, causing the colony to die out. It's actually one of the storylines in many different science fiction books is that we do establish Mars or the moon colonies if you think that's possible, and that, you know, they die out because Earth has some sort of world war or other catastrophe, and so supplies stop coming. Those places aren't sustainable to live, right? So he says he's actually worried about that. He says, but we can make the moon city self-growing in less than 10 years. Mars will take 20 plus years due to the 26-month iteration cycle, which I think is how long it would take things to get to Mars, right? And so it just takes longer. But since the moon's close, within 10 years, we could have it be self-sustaining, self-growing. All their food, all their water, all their everything would be self-sustaining. He says this is what matters most. Part of why, you know, anyone would be concerned about that would be, again, if something happens to Earth that destroys civilization or resets it, you might have some colony on the moon that could outlast it. We do potentially seem to have some evidence that maybe we already did that once. There's plenty you could go into. The Mars Mystery by Graham Hancock and other books. I can't remember some of them, but they talk about the alleged evidence that NASA allegedly hid of structures that indicated that humans had already once colonized the moon and Mars, and that those actually collapsed at some point. So maybe they wouldn't be as self-sustaining as we thought, or maybe the level of cyclical destruction doesn't care which planet you're on in the system. They're all going to be affected. That's maybe what else is indicated. But he at least knows that these things are possible, that they've happened before, and that if he is actually going to be serious about planning anything for Mars or the moon, he has to consider these things. So it is intelligent. Whether you think he's an actor and that's all lie and the space is fake and gay thing, whatever. If that's not the case, though, then this is actually what you would be intelligent to say and do, right? We would be intelligent to shift your plans around these things. So that's what Elon, and that's not the only. There's apparently many tens of tweets and indications that he very much understands cyclical destruction is existing in our past and potentially imminent in our very near future. So people like that don't build these 10,000-year clocks and don't talk about repositioning their goals of Mars and the moon unless they really understand it's very realistic and maybe even, again, imminent. And for some reason, we have all of these quite wealthy people who are not just wealthy, but also in industries or situations in which they might be in the know, or their intelligence level is such that they may have figured this out, that want to come to Colorado. I've told you all before, for whatever reason, my guidance when I was 18 came in clear as day and said to me that I would absolutely need to move to Colorado in order to live through the coming cataclysms or civilizational collapse or whatever it was that was going to happen. That was way back in the year 2000. Clear as day, knew it for sure. Kind of just like, I never forgot. I just kind of was like doing life. And so I didn't think about it at all. But I had been told, I had seen, I'd understood that that would be what I would do. And then life happened. And then all of a sudden, quite by accident, I ended up in Colorado. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I was supposed to come here all along. That was like the plan, right? That my soul and my guides had told me way, way back when. And so not really a surprise that I'm here. But why are these people here, right? Because they think they know something. Alex Karp, most recently, I've talked about this in the Winning Report and other shows. He's the CEO of Palantir. Palantir, of course, also connected with Peter Thiel. There's a big technocratic, high level, you may hate them for everything they do, but like very high level, very intelligent, very wealthy technocrats. So Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir Technologies, recently made the state's largest residential real estate purchase by paying $120 million for a 3,700 acre St. Benedict's Monastery in Old Snowmass in December of 2025. So just a few months ago. St. Benedict's Monastery. So some people were like, oh, it's the land, it's, spiritual. And so they want it just like Katy Perry wanted the nuns monastery. And there's something there that maybe they want to convolute or twist for their own dark black magic rituals or whatever. Yes, that's absolutely potential. But there's also this, again, ongoing indication that Colorado might be a place to be. And so perhaps Alex Karp got wind of that and is like, I'm going to try to survive this thing. I'm going to do it in Colorado. We also have John Malone, known as the Cable Cowboy. He's got Colorado's largest private landowner. Several hundred thousands of acres. Stefan Soloview, Michael Bloomberg, Mark Stevens is a partial list of exceptionally rich people who own hundreds of millions of dollars of hundreds of acres in Colorado, specifically in the Rocky Mountains themselves. And so very interesting. You may also want to know that the suspicious observer himself, Space Weather News, also came to Colorado very specifically because he had studied so much about the cyclical destruction and its connection to the sun, and thought about how the poles might shift and where water might go and where land might shift and what might happen, that he decided that Colorado is one of the places on Earth that is quite likely to live through a cyclical destruction event like this. So he, being, in my opinion, an expert on the subject, chose Colorado. And so he has a whole ranch here. You can actually go visit, and I think you can still buy land there and kind of live there with him if you, I don't know how you make the cut or whatever, and I might be wrong. There might be nothing left now. Might have been all bought up, but he came and did that here. So right next to me, he's just like a stone's throw away. 20 minutes, I could be there. So he's right here, right? So he's here too. So all of these people moved to Colorado. Yeah, could be a coincidence, could be not. I did a series of episodes actually years ago now. This is an old Rogue Ways episode. Before it was Rogue Soul. This was an interview with Doug Vogt, VOGT. Doug Vogt runs Die Hold Foundation. This was, I think, his third visit to Rogue Ways. I can't remember. There's definitely more than one interview we've done together. Still worth your time. Evergreen content. Go check it out. It's back up. The YouTube channel is working again, so you can go to youtube.com/@rogueways and get there, or you can go to youtube.com/c/rogueways, or you can just search for Rogue Soul, because it's Rogue Soul is the new branding, right? And so you can find any of this here. You can also search for Doug Vogt, and then in quotation marks, if you write Rogue Ways, you will also be brought to this episode. Back when I was still numbering episodes, this was season 5, episode 4, and this was in 2020. So 6 years ago. Jesus, really? God, that just made me feel really old. I can't believe that's 6 years ago. Okay. He's dead, by the way. He's since passed. And so you can't talk to him anymore, but you can see his interviews like these. And we talk all about his research into the cyclical destruction. We talk about the galactic dust shells that we seem to go through. That's the same as saying the galactic current sheet, which is when we pass through the sort of middle line of the Milky Way galaxy. We pass through it, we wibble wobble above and below it, right? And we're about to hit it, or we're hitting it, and we're going to go through it. And that is a big deal, because there's a lot of dust in that, and there's a lot of electric volatility in that. And the sun tends to gather this dust, and when it gathers enough of it, it explodes it off of itself. And that's like a nova. We talked about micronovas. We talked about multidimensional reality. He was into the concept that its potential, I'm not exaggerating, this is a scientist who's been studying this for his whole life. This is a scientist who has studied it, has written books, has created content, and the government has been following his work to try to figure out how to survive this thing and what might be going on. He brings up multidimensional reality and that it's possible that this is actually a moment when timelines split, and that that's maybe part of that cyclical destruction, and that one maybe group of consciousnesses, group of people goes one way and one group goes the other way. And what's fascinating to me about that is he came to that on his own, but it actually mirrors what seems to be many prophetic and spiritualist takes on the future of humanity. It also mirrors what I seem to be told through the spiritual ancestors and my channel messages from them. They also have said that we're going to go through, they describe it differently. And honestly, they describe it so differently that as I was first channeling it and reading it, I didn't really connect it necessarily with what Doug Vogt says. And I wasn't as familiar with the geomagnetic excursion that we were going through. So I definitely didn't connect it with that. But the more I've learned about those things, and I go back and read those messages, which you can go read on my Substack right now, even if you're not subscribed, although you should subscribe and also pay the monthly. Be subscribed at the monthly paid level so you can get the channeled messages as they come through. But 4, 5, 6 years ago, whenever the first message came through about the coming global catastrophes, they basically described a frequency that we would be coming in contact with that would shift everything, that would affect human consciousness, and that could essentially was going to leave some people behind and carry other people with it. That seemed really confusing to me. I was like, I don't really get it. Do we turn into dust? Are we like just pure light at that point? Like, I don't really know what you're saying, but I'm channeling it through. I'm saying what you're saying, right? And then a few years later, I actually asked a question of them. I sometimes just sit down, let whatever message wants to come through. And other times I ask a specific question. So I asked a question that was something like, can you clarify whether there's going to be, a big event that like destroys civilization or whatever? And they basically said the exact same message again, but in slightly different words and a little bit more, in my opinion, clear. Maybe just to me though, but who knows? But if you compare the two, because then someone was like, didn't you already like have this message? And I was like, did I? And I went back and I was like, oh my God, I did. They're probably just like, oh my God, this girl's so stupid. But like, I went back and I looked and they're like the same message, but in a slightly different way. And now it was saying, it was a wave, a current or something. And it's just slightly different language with the exact same message. And now I'm reconnecting with this Doug Vogt, who I've interviewed multiple times on the show. And he basically is saying the same thing. And then I'm looking at all these people talking about the geomagnetic excursion, the polar flip, and I'm like, they're saying the same thing. It's like all sorts of directions this is coming through. Talks about the cosmic rays that are likely to come, that some of those could be also that a nova could occur, and that would definitely wipe out all life on Earth, but a micronova could occur, and it would just disrupt everything enough to reset civilization, to cause a potential ice age, all these things. He talks about black holes being at the center of every galaxy. That's also something that Nassim Haramein and other sort of modern physicists have shown is not just, potentially true, but is like, it's pretty much fact. It just depends on who you are and what evidence you want to go with. God, I don't even remember what he was talking about with Venus. I'd have to go back and watch it myself. And so this and more is just in this one episode. Like I said, we did multiple episodes, so you can also hear him talk about other aspects. But you can also go to his website, even though he has passed, his website's still up, the Diehold Foundation. He has his books. He also has other people's books. These are probably pretty cool. They go as far as the theory of multidimensional reality, gravitational mystery spots of the United States, creation of the Hebrew alphabet, Moses and the 10-code system, from Abraham to Jacob, the Exodus and finding of Mount Sinai, the prophets and the priests. So he also does definitely connect this to the Bible, seemingly indicating cyclical destruction as well, and predicting that it will come again, which would be normal if you understood that it was cyclical, right? So yeah, he also wanted to fund geological expeditions to gather information on the past climate and biomass of selected regions of the Earth. This period of interest from 10,000 to 120,000 before years ago, right? The collection of samples, he said, should be tested and dated. He believes he can determine what side of the Earth will be facing the sun when it novas during the next geomagnetic reversal or pole flip. So he, like many people who study this enough, they're not saying if it occurs. They're saying it absolutely occurs. It occurs cyclically. It will occur again. But can we figure out how to live through it? Again, maybe you're just in another dimension now and you have a whole different experience of it. I don't know. But if you're going to remain here in physical body, you know, how do you get through it? And so he's saying if we study this enough, especially these very fascinating gravitational and magnetic anomaly places, that we might be able to figure out which part of the Earth will be facing the sun when it novas. When it novas, it will hit that side. That side will be decimated, but the other side has a chance to then survive. Very interesting, right? So he proposes how that is done. He says the other goal of the foundation is to research those gravitational anomalies. Like I said, the third is to fund research covering the causes of the past ice ages and mass extinctions. He basically wanted to prove that that was correct, that it was a solar event or even a moving through that galactic current sheet event, you know, that this is then provable. We have all the evidence we need for it. I think we do. I think he just wanted to make it really, really, really airtight and official and also get it, you know, in the eyes of all the scientists, just like that report from 2003 said, for some reason, most people don't seem to notice this thing that is actually not that hard to notice. So he also wanted people to notice. Yeah. And to see if this collapsing magnetic field, which again, by the way, we know we're in a collapsing magnetic field. We've lost 30% of the magnetic shield just recently, as in the past 30 years or so. And so, or maybe it's 100 years, pretty quick. And it's speeding up all the time, as well as the poles. The location of our poles has been speeding up as well. So, yeah, he talks about the Hebrew alphabet. So does Nassim Haramein. They talk about how it's encoded actually in the geometry of space, time, and material reality itself, which is fascinating. So that's its whole own thing. And so, yeah. He says the years between the geomagnetic reversals are about 12,068 years. This number, he says, surprisingly appears in the Torah in code. So he said, how did man know the exact number of years in between? So he wants to get into that stuff too. So it's indicated that society and civilization barely keeps itself together each time that we're moving through these things. So that's Doug Vogt. That's the Diehold Foundation. That's stuff you can go check out. This is another page of his about the geomagnetic reversals themselves, and the ice ages that happen and how they're related to the sun and how many years are between them and the dust shell and all of this stuff. It just goes into detail, so you can check all of that out. He talks about ocean currents changing, earthquakes happening, volcanoes happening, all of this because of those solar cycles that the sun's going through, and how you might get through it. But he also talks about the evidence on the moon of these reversals. So bringing us to the Artemis 2 trip. Allegedly, this Artemis 2 trip that is coming up, that should have launched on the 8th of February, I think, and now it's been put off till later in the month. Allegedly, it's just to go around the moon. They want to go to the back side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. They want to see what's there maybe, or just see that they can do it. Let's see what they say they're going to do. They're going to take 4 crew members further than humans have ever ventured in space before. The mission is aiming for 8th of February takeoff. They didn't make it there. They're going to return humans to the moon for the first time since the last lunar landing by exploring more about the moon or going around the moon. They want to build a space station called Lunar Gateway, where astronauts will be able to live and work and prepare for missions to Mars. So they're getting serious about it. Supposedly, they want to set things up. So they're going to check out how far can we go and how easy can it be, and can we, you know, create a colony there. They want to test the Space Launch System rockets. It's our best effort, they say, to beat China to the moon and making a base there. So there's also some international, you know, intrigue here. They tell you all about which rockets and how they'll use the fuel and what they're going to do and etc. I don't really care about any of that. During the 10-day mission, the crew will test life support, navigation, communication systems to confirm everything operates as it should. They'll complete it in the capsule while still in Earth's orbit so that the astronauts can take or are closer to home in the event of anything going wrong. Capsule will then enter Earth's high orbit while the crew will manually pilot Orion before control is handed back to controllers at NASA. Astronauts will then spend 4 days circling the moon, traveling approximately 4,600 miles beyond its far side before returning to Earth and splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. How successful it will be is critical to bringing NASA one step closer to landing astronauts on the moon, which is the goal of Artemis 3. Third stage is currently aimed to launch in mid-2027. So they want people on the moon building bases by 2027. It's already 2026 right now, so pretty quickly. I think they've maybe hyped things up a bit faster because they might have noticed the timeline is radically changing. So I told you earlier that there's some people who study this have put the date out as this possible, polar reversal, nova, whatever it is that might happen as far as 2080 or so. But there's different things that have been happening with the sun and with our magnetosphere and with the pole itself that have shown most of these researchers it's a lot closer in than that. So a lot of those people have changed their timeline and said, actually, we're looking no later than the 2040s. So if NASA's serious and they actually are trying to get to the moon and build a base there, potentially on the far side, which makes more sense than anything because it never sees the light of the sun, therefore perhaps is protected from novas, then that might actually be what's going on, right? Why they're suddenly like, right now we got to build a base. We haven't done anything since the 70s, but right now we have to build a base. So they have all of these crew. They're already ready to go. The launch was delayed. And so they're going to get it sometime this month, maybe as far out as April. These are the dates that they have selected to potentially launch, some in February and then March and then April. So we'll see. And, here's their mission patch. A little bit less weird than a lot of the other mission patches that we have been able to see. A lot of them very, very dark, very satanic or occult or just super bizarre. This one's literally just a sort of diamond shape. It's got the A of the Artemis. It's got that, NASA and every other space agency, Nike, swoop. It's got that, of course, it has to. Has the moon in the foreground, the Earth in the background, Artemis 2. And so that's their patch, their official mission patch. And here's the other missions to the moon. This is Artemis right now, but the other ones were all Apollos. Apollo. One of the Apollo missions in which they allegedly went to the moon and got moon rocks and brought them back looks like it features the horsemen of the apocalypse and the sun seeming to go insane in the background. So it seems like they're admitting, yeah, we're going to the moon because we think the sun is very destructive, might bring about the apocalypse. That patch seems pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward, that patch. So when you know that they have got rocks from the moon and that those indicate that, yes, the sun does go nova cyclically, and we can find tektites and glass beads and things on the moon that prove that that's true, well, then you know what they were doing on the moon. But the dark side of the moon is a different story. What's out there? I don't know. Can we get there? I don't know. If we can get there, is it a good place for a base? Probably. If you can actually have a base on the moon, that'd be the place to do it. Not as fun. It's dark, right? Not as great, but probably the place where you would survive a nova, micronova, or otherwise. Maybe, right? So pretty interesting. They seem to indicate this even on the patches. Apollo and Artemis. Apollo and Artemis, of course, are from Greek mythology. Apollo and Artemis are twin siblings of the children of Zeus. Apollo, of course, is the sun, and Artemis is the moon. Apollo representing, of course, knowledge and wisdom and leadership and all of this, and Artemis, the feminine, the receptive, the, quiet, the moon. So we have the sun and the moon. The sun, why would you name all of your missions to the moon after the sun? Well, because you think the sun has something to do with cyclical destruction. You're trying to find evidence of it. That's why. Now, why would you call it Artemis? Now we're talking about the moon itself, finally. Artemis is the moon, right? In Greek mythology. Well, because she's the twin sister of that. So you're admitting that this is connected to those previous missions, that they're twin missions, in fact. And that's at least part of it, right? It's connected, Apollo and Artemis. So getting this continuity there, right? And that they're connected, and that this mission to the moon is connected to those previous. So if the previous missions to the moon were to gather data to prove that, in fact, the cyclical destruction happens and that the sun going nova is what causes it, that's why the pole flips, that's why the chaos happens, that's also potentially wiping out a lot of Earth. It's also potentially why then we get an ice age, all sorts of things. Then the next time you go, it might be to survive that. To survive that. The moon might be the only place you can survive that. And so that's an interesting, fascinating reason why Musk and other technocrats, NASA might have this reinvigorated push to get to the moon, to the dark side of the moon. That's why you'd go all the way around it. And then potentially set up bases there that were self-sustaining, even if Earth has lots and lots of issues. You would hedge your bets on all sides if you could, if you were smart enough, if you were capable enough, if you were rich enough. You would have an underground vault somewhere, perhaps like Colorado or in the Andes Mountains or other very high places that have stayed geologically, I want to say, stagnant for many cycles of destruction, haven't been submerged below the sea, like still exist, etc. You would do that. You would have your underground vaults there, your above ground, potentials there, and you would also perhaps go to the moon and maybe Greenland. Greenland, going to the moon, and this moment that we're in where cyclical destruction seems likely. Again, even experts are saying no later than 2040. I'm telling you before 2033, because that's literally what I was told, and didn't go looking for that information. I wasn't even thinking about cyclical destruction. I in no way was imagining that at all when allegedly Sai Baba came through a wall as a light ball and dropped into a guy's head while I was listening to him talk about totally unrelated things, and I didn't even want to be there, hadn't planned to be there, and wasn't quite enjoying myself, actually. But nonetheless, this light ball came through the wall, dropped into his head, and all of a sudden he was like a different person. No one in the room seemed to care or notice. I was at this talk he was giving about reflexology, which is like where you press on your feet in order to feel better, basically. Totally unrelated. Nobody cared. All of a sudden, he's this different person. He's speaking in a totally different way. I saw the light ball come in and drop in his head. I see light balls. I interact with other dimensional beings. I have my whole life. Like, that part isn't that shocking, but I never saw a light ball drop into a guy's head and have him completely change his demeanor and talk in a completely different fashion. And what he said was, starting in 2020, things would get bad and they'd get worse and worse and worse and worse. But don't worry, he said, for I am with you, meaning Christ is with you, and the Christ consciousness will return to earth by 2033, he said. You might think, wow, that doesn't really have much to do with cyclical destruction. I think that has everything to do with cyclical destruction. I think it has everything to do with why all of a sudden everybody who has any money or any intelligence and longer views, longer nows, longer views of society and civilization is looking at right now at this weakened magnetosphere, at the drifting poles, at these magnetic anomalies in the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and wondering what might happen and how can we survive it. So again, someone who does a really good job of summarizing a lot of the evidence and information around this is Suspicious Observer, who is also now Space Weather News. Space Weather News is the official name of their channel now on YouTube. The Disaster Cycle, a full documentary, just came out 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen it yet, highly suggest it. It's about an hour long. It's free. You just watch it on YouTube. He has plenty of other documentaries. I haven't watched any of them because I didn't even really know much about him until the last handful of years, and didn't even really pay much attention to him until much more recently than that. So, no offense to him or anybody. I knew he was cool. I just was doing other things. So that's really cool. I bet his other documentaries are also great. This is Ben Davidson. This is the man who started that ranch nearby to me. totally by coincidence. We do not know each other. We're not connected. We just ended up in the same place for this geomagnetic excursion to conclude, for this pole flip to occur, potentially any day now. So check that out if you want to know even more. Again, Doug Vogt, those episodes I did with him, those are great. You can check those out. You can check out any of his books and his content at the Diehold Foundation. You can check out Suspicious Observer, Space Weather News, those documentaries. You can check back. I did an episode not that long ago about the cyclical destruction called Solar Catastrophe and Cyclical Destruction. That one outlines a little bit more of the sort of evidence and science around it. And yeah, once I saw the Artemis 2 mission was heading to the moon, I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what they're doing. And I'm sure it's connected with this. And yeah, it seems like it probably is. They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that officially until perhaps it's over, because one of the things that's true, people talk about like, well, they don't want to tell everyone because everyone will freak out and people will stop working or stop functioning. Yeah, sure, maybe. I don't know that they care all that much, but probably there's something to that because they need our labor and they need our money and they need our value to build their underground bunkers and try to figure out where the ice sheets will be thinnest and where they might survive and all of that, and to build their space bases, if that's what they're going to do. They need some of us. I think it's more, though, if you've seen some disaster movies when they do have bunkers who are known about and everybody just tries to swarm it and then that ends up destroying the bunker. It's like, I think it's more like that. Humans are not very good at actually thinking through things and not reacting emotionally. I would not try to swarm to a bunker to survive anything like this. I would just accept that most likely I'm going to die in an event like that, and that's okay. Or we were all going to die as soon as we were born. There was never a doubt about that. That was a given. It's always been with us. That the knowledge of our eventual death has been ever present for anyone willing to acknowledge it. It's not even sad. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. It's for sure going to happen. And the people who should be in a bunker or anything like that should be way more capable than myself at surviving. Way more capable than me, probably way more capable than you. If somebody's selecting who gets to go into those, I would think they're selecting on some sort of qualifications like those: temperament, intelligence, and the like, because the rest of the people are not going to be quite necessary in a survival situation, and it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why you might not be told. There's a lot of reasons why it might be suppressed over time. And people will ask me, right, like, where should I go to try to survive this? Like, my best is obviously Colorado. Yeah, here I am. I was told that in 2000. Here I am now in 2026, actually doing it. And again, accidentally, actually, even though I was told. And, Ben Davidson, like I said, is here. Lots of those, quite wealthy people are here. Maybe Greenland, if you can get to Greenland, maybe that's a cool place. The Andes, like I said, have been mentioned. I'm sure the Himalayas would probably be, perhaps a good place too, although the North Pole is going to be really close to there as it moves, as it shifts, as it flips. And so maybe you don't want to be in an Arctic region. So maybe not the Himalayas. Maybe Himalayas will end up going the way of Antarctica, where there's a lot hidden there in the next go round that people could find, right? Who knows? But, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life or what to do or scare you or anything, except to just say, yeah, enjoy your life while you're here, and maybe get a little bit closer to your soul. It's always good news. It's always a good thing to do. It's always going to be helpful for you, no matter what does or doesn't happen. And, if there is something to that, multiple dimensions breaking off, or, in a more sort of traditional Christian view, something like the rapture, right? Where some souls go one way and other souls go another way, timelines split. One experiences maybe the big full disaster and the other maybe doesn't. I don't know. There could be something to that. It's indicated in some of the channel messages I receive. Maybe I'll try to get more clarification on it upcoming, but we're here. It's now, and the time is near. And so enjoy while you can. And until then, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
behind screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than